Oh, starter Pokemon. To most people, they're seen as required crutches during a playthrough of your favorite mainline series Pokemon game. And besides buffs like Mega Evolution or any other crazy gimmicks that were introduced into the series, a starter falls short on many of the key aspects to make a Pokemon truly great, such as a Pseudo Legendary. But what if starter Pokemon shared the traits of a giant like a Pseudo Legend? For example, having increased base stat totals, or even new abilities and typings. For the trio of Pokemon that are getting reworked today, the changes will be done in a hypothetical Gen 3 Hoenn remake without Mega Evolutions. Because honestly, no Mega Evolutions allow us to manipulate the starters in ways that are void of any already existing changes. It's also best to address this question first with the Hoenn starters, because in my humble opinion, there are clear reworks that need to be addressed when it comes to the balance between these three. Oh, and since one of them is already on the screen, it really wouldn't be a bad idea to start with the Jungle Reptile first. To begin, with all honesty, Sceptile needs some serious help when it comes to the ability department. Overgrow as its first ability is actually okay to me, as the elemental equivalents for water and fire type starters in Torrent and Blaze, respectively, are a main factor which distinguish these Pokemon as being unique and special in the eyes of players. Its hidden ability in Unburden, however, is where my main issues arise. If a Pokemon with this ability loses its held item, its speed is doubled. That's fine. Unburden on a Pokemon with 120 base speed looks good to begin with, as your first thought may be, well, it counters Choice Scarf users. But, surprise surprise, the doubling of speed that is granted by Unburden gets removed once you swap out from battle, making the ability incredibly niche that is dependent on prediction for any long-term use. And given that pseudo-legends are meant to be above-average forces of nature, an ability that's just reliant on luck is the last thing that any Pokemon, especially Sceptile, who's always been overlooked, mind you, should have. So, I'm advocating for a new, custom hidden ability for each of the starter Pokemon, as like their defaults in Overgrow, Torrent, and Blaze, a custom ability will help distinguish them from the sea of other mons whose typing and battle role they share. And yes, I promise you guys, the abilities will not be overpowered and they will be balanced. What? Yeah, all jokes aside though, these new abilities are going to be lore-oriented, drawing traits from their Pokédex entries and design factors as well. Sceptile is identified as a creature who has regenerative abilities when under heat, as it regulates its body temperature by baking under sunlight, similar to its real-life inspiration, which is a lizard. So, capturing this idea in the fullest means creating a hidden ability that will be dubbed Ultraviolet Skin. If Sunny Day is active, Pokemon with this ability regenerate 1/8 of their maximum HP rounded down. Contrary to Dry Skin, which lowers HP by 1/8 when in sun, Ultraviolet Skin helps patch up a weakness in Sceptile's design, which is a severe lack of defensive longevity within a battle. Its second default ability slot, which is currently empty, plays into this theme of lore and longevity even further, because trainers can now use Harvest to capitalize on a different side of Sceptile. Harvest was chosen after close inspection of its design. The yellow nodules on its back are in fact seeds that Sceptile personally grows, which are said to be bursting with nutrients that bring life and growth into plants and trees alike. An Aguave Berry or Citrus Berry now become viable options for Sceptile as recovery methods, since the Pokemon has a much better backbone to do this strategy from. No pun intended. Alright, so we got the abilities in Harvest and Ultraviolet Skin out of the way. Now its base stat total is our next biggest hurdle. If you don't know, all pseudo-legendaries have a 600 stat total across the board. No more, no less. Instead of being just straight up lazy and giving it a random assortment of statistical investments, I'm gonna make the distribution to the likes of a specific battling archetype. In layman's terms, that means catering towards a specific style of play for the Pokemon at hand, whether that be offensive or defensive. At first glance, Sceptile's spread shows us that its design intention is meant for swift, rapid attacking, playing as delicate revenge utility while also having a chance to fill its shoes as a late-game sweeper. Because of this, 20 out of the 70 points we need to fill are going straight into its attack. With access to Dragon Dance and a moveset that favors physical attacking, a plus 20 in attack gives Sceptile users plausibility to run a physical sweeping variant, as moves in Leaf Blade, Grassy Glide, and Earthquake all back up this archetype. 10 more points are going into its special attack, which also grant this lizard statistical balance and extra cushion to launch high-powered special moves from. And since Sceptile is geared for spontaneous use, its defenses are going to show this. They are not going to be boosted to the levels of Ferrothorn, for example, but they will be generously compensated for. With 20 additional points in HP, I'm using lore again as the primary justification for this change. Sceptile and lizard-like creatures have regenerative abilities, such as regrowing limbs, which in essence gives them more life. So, a well-rounded and subtle HP stat of 90 is justifiable to me. The exact same will be said for its special defense, and an additional 15 points of defense was intentionally invested to make its physical side weaker than its special. Well, in terms of defense at least. So any foes who are looking to eliminate this new Pseudo before it wipes their squad clean has a chance to exploit its designated weakness. Sceptile is a monotype Pokemon with a singular type in Grass. Its two other rival competitors in Swampert and Blaziken, though, have absurdly good secondary typings which fit their styles of play, as Water, Ground, and Fire Fighting are elite type combos for defensive and offensive play respectively. In lieu of starter balance and design characteristics, the normal type is going to be Sceptile's new secondary typing. I'm intentionally steering away from the Dragon type as its pick for three main reasons. Firstly, being that 9 out of the 11 current Pseudo Legendaries already share the traditional Dragon type, so I wanted to shake up the norm for typings. Second is that the Dragon type for Sceptile was already explored by Game Freak in Generation 6 in the form of Mega Sceptile, which I do agree is very cool, but it's not unique enough for today. And thirdly, the Dragon type is a little too unbalanced when putting the secondary typings in perspective with each other. Normal as a type also makes sense from an environmental perspective. Just let me explain before I see pitchforks in the comments. Since Sceptile is a jungle ruler, it lives in environments that are filled with field and animal-esque Pokemon. I'm talking about early game birds or rodents, who are also coincidentally always the normal type. Its closest biological relative in Kecleon is also a pure normal as well, only serving as proof that this type would be a solid fit for Sceptile. Alright, that was the longest section of the video, I'll be honest. But my second favorite Hoenn starter in Swampert is up next on this roster, and the Deadly Axolotl already has some serious power behind it at first glance. For whatever reason though, Swampert has 5 extra base points than Sceptile and Blaziken, so we're working with 65 points to invest instead of 70. I'm following the same upgrade process that I did with Sceptile, which is playing into its designated archetype. In this case, a slower yet sturdy defensive wall that can tank hits all while dishing out a reasonable amount of damage back to foes. Minor stat changes and an extra 5 attack and HP give some statistical balances to Swampert that are present in all Pseudo Legends, and a buff in its speed to 70 from 60 pays homage to Swampert's lore, stating it as a Pokemon who is quite strong enough to swim as fast as a literal jet ski in fact. The remaining 40 points are then spread across its mid-range values, specifically with an extra 20 points in its defense, as I want to emphasize a physical defensive variant of Swampert as its primary set. A wall like Swampert has no recovery by default. It's reliant on secondary items such as leftovers or wish support to stay alive and active. But its new custom ability will only work in sync with the points I just mentioned, because now is a better time than ever to discuss it. Instead of making Swampert fundamentally basic with its defensive design, it now plays a role similar to Goodra in the sense that its new ability Mudskin lowers the accuracy of opponents by 1 stage if struck by a physical attack. Contrary to Gooey, Mudskin makes enemies who use physical attacks think twice about rolling the dice to land an attack, as if you play any sort of competitive format, you know that one wrong turn can quite literally spell out death for your entire team. And fun fact for you guys, this custom ability is a cute little callback to a lore piece which states that Swampert lathers itself in mud while on beaches to keep its skin fresh and hydrated. The more you know. As for its second default ability, I'm taking a unique approach and giving it Sticky Hold as a choice for trainers to use, as Swampert is now unable to lose a held item with this ability. In full transparency, this was also given as additional support for defensive Swampert, as moves in Knockoff or Thief no longer cripple its reliance for recovery items. Enemies facing Sticky Hold as an ability are required to deal with the tedious leftovers or defensive berries that one will use on a water pivot like Swampert. Okay, so now we have our favorite lizard and axolotl reworked, which means we're left with the uber chicken himself, Blaziken. Spoiler alert though, Blaziken will no longer have speed boost as its hidden ability. Not only is it straight up overpowered when pairing it with the rest of its toolbox, but speed boost is on a different planet in terms of strength that the aforementioned abilities we created cannot even compare to. Essentially what I'm saying is that we need balance between all of these different changes. Filling the shoes of speed boost as a hidden ability is hard, but it's important to make note of Blaziken's intention and design. The wrappings around its hand and structural build of its extended, tube-like legs draw similarities to martial artists, as they use arm straps as shock absorbers to strike enemies continuously, alongside outfits that are uniquely square and baggy in their own sense. Since the lore for this Pokemon describes it as practicing these same fundamentals with incredibly strong leg muscles, Blaziken will be oriented towards an offensive style of play more than anything. Fighter's Guidance, being its replacement hidden ability, states the following. Kicking moves used by a Pokemon with this ability cannot be protected or stopped by moves and abilities. Similar to the Dark-type move in Feint that breaks an enemy's Protect for the turn, Fighter's Guidance allows Blaziken to prioritize offensive moves in the form of Blaze Kick or its notorious High Jump Kick. A player who wants to take the gamble on landing a High Jump Kick will be rewarded the vast majority of the time, if I'm being honest, as there's no need for Crash Recoil prediction to happen when you know an enemy has Protect as a move. While on the topic of abilities too, its second one in Reckless was an obvious pick to me and most people after learning about its fighting personality, since Reckless opens the door for fun strategies in Flare Blitz, High Jump Kick, and Brave Bird. And yes, you heard that correctly, this thing actually gets Brave Bird as a move option. While Reckless allows Blaziken to fire off nukes with an attack of 120, it gets worn down extremely fast due to its below average defenses and field hazards that one needs to account for. Speaking on stats and defenses anyway, Blaziken's new offensive spread lends us 70 points to work with. To remind you guys, balance needs to be catered to when it comes to this starter specifically. I'm cautiously giving it 10 more attack and 15 more special attack, bringing its offenses up to 130 and 125 respectively. A base speed increase to 90 up from 80 as well necessitates players to strategically think their matchups through, since Blaziken's new speed is 10 points shy of the base 100 stat that is used as a competitive benchmark. These stat distributions so far let us conclude this chicken with 10 more HP, 15 more defense, and 10 extra special defense. If you couldn't tell already, its individual stats were essentially raised equally across the board, since Blaziken's initial design by Game Freak is an incredible example of balance and trade-offs. You want to detonate offensive nukes? Sure, that's more than doable, but it's gonna cost you some HP and a lack of longevity on the battlefield due to below average defenses and no default recovery. Alright, that about wraps things up for this first trio of starters. This was one of my most enjoyable videos to produce and research, so if you enjoyed this, I wouldn't mind it if you were to hit the like button. And most importantly, what changes would you do to these starters to make them some of the strongest contenders in the series? Till next time, y'all.